Translation teaching. Translation teaching. Translation has been taught in Iranian universities for a long time, and there are still problems regarding translation instruction, since many of the instructors lack any specialization in translation studies, but rather have studied English literature, teaching, and linguistics, and may have never tried actual translation themselves. Therefore, they are not intimately familiar with the difficulties of translation and cannot link translation theories with the translation practice. Translation teaching methods. First, there are transmission approach, the traditional product and teacher-centered approach, in which a text is given to each student to be translated and read in the class. The instructor provides the final answer in this approach. Next is transactional approach. It is based on group learning, where teamwork and communication are very important, but still the final answer is provided by the instructor. Next is the transformational approach. It is based on learning and is student-centered and relates to group learning and discovery of the learning process with instructor guidance. A bridge is built between class activity and translation done by outside the university's environment. The proposed approach to teaching translation. There are comparing two translations. Students will be divided into groups of 4 or 5 students, and 2 different translations of specific texts will be given to them. All groups will be required to compare these 2 targets, the text strategies and methods applied, and make judgment about the quality of both, or ask the group to determine which text has more errors. Next is familiarizing with collocations, expression, and terms. A short stack full of blanks will be given to the groups to be filled. The student will be required to find the proper terms, collocations, and expression left blank in the short text. Next is having group discussions. Students will be divided into groups of 2 or 3 and will be requested to discuss the translation they have prepared for the class, to explain the method and strategies they have applied to their teammates, and to report to the class the result of their discussions at the end of the class. Next is editing. The student will be divided into groups of 2 or 3, and a target text will be delivered to each group to make use of principle of editing, which were taught before and improve the target. Next is back translating. Back translating in this method is considered a standard way of assessing of the accuracy of a translation. A student will be divided into groups of 2 and will be asked to take seats behind each other, and then a text made up of a short sentence will be delivered to the student sitting on the front chair to be translated sentence by sentence and handed to the next student. At the end of the class, students will be asked to read out their translation to the whole class to see how much of the essence and message of the original text has been lost. Next is domesticating and foreignizing. The translation attitude towards the original text or the target reader has been discussed throughout history, and difference of such distinctive approach and can be tested. The students of a class will be divided into 2 teams, and each team will also be subdivided into small groups. One team will be made to translate a text using the domestication method, and the other team will be required to use foreignization. This group will read their translation at the end, so that the differences of these 2 approaches are relieved. Next is practicing scopus-centered translation. Modern theories of translation highlight the fact that prospective rules of translation are no longer applicable, and translation of each text has its own requirement. Indeed, the translation or the commissioner's intention or aim determines the proper ways of translating a text. So for experimenting with the theory, a class will be divided into 4 groups, and each group will be required to determine specific rules to be followed for translating a specific text by another groups. At the end of the class, each group will be asked to read out its translation to be compared with the specification prepared by other groups. Next is translating according to models. Various translation models have been set by theorists such as Catford, Nida, Newmark, Finney, and terdapat. So for example, students can be divided in several groups to resolve a short text and its translation to the text of translation described by Catford, and to report their finding to the class at the end of their activity. Next is discussing needed tools for translation. Each translator at any level of knowledge will need tools like general and special dictionaries and encyclopedias. In order to familiarize students with such tools and their significance and application for translations, students will be divided into several groups, and each will be asked to discuss a certain type of dictionary of encyclopedia and then explain its use to the rest of the class. Thank you.